Hello, I will be um, recording my recording of this just in case it won't let me export it. This will be my practice interview. I'm using the big interview level 2 practice, it looks like. This was the first one I saw outside of the general practice, and this should just be some basic behavioral questions found in most interviews. Of course, if this was a real interview, I'd be in suit and tie, but this is what I had on at the time, so let's get started. Yes. So once this gets started, I'll answer the question. Yeah, so something that's not on my resume is a big involvement with Purdue's marching band. I find this to be an important experience both because I think it's something interesting. It's something not everyone gets into. It's really interesting to be able to practice and play and perform music in front of my peers. It's a special experience that I enjoy greatly. It also was a great opportunity for me to engage in leadership. Leading my section of students within the band required initiative, thinking proactively to make sure that everything was set up beforehand because it was an additional amount of responsibility on top of something that is already outside of my coursework. So it also tested my time management skills as well. All right, 3, 2, 1. So usually I try to figure out how somebody functions in their working environment because everyone has different styles of work ethic that works for them that allows them to function at their best. But I would say the type of worker or peer or colleague I find most challenging to work with are those who do not find it necessary to communicate the rationale of their decision making with their team and instead reserve that for meetings with those outside of the team they normally engage with. This type of behavior isn't super common, but additionally, occasionally I'll find myself caught off guard by the comments of my peers, wondering why they didn't bring that up in a meeting with the team beforehand, or why this is the first time we're addressing it in front of somebody who we're all trying to present to and to convey information to. I'm going to be saving these answers in between each time just in case I can export these instead to make it easier. So as I find myself at the end of my journey in college and my time learning a lot of valuable skills and being able to put a lot of those skills into practice and projects, I think that it's time that I start thinking about moving ahead to finding a position with a company that allows me to apply these skills while also growing those skills at the same time and providing opportunities for me to learn outside of college is something that I value heavily. So me looking now is me just making sure to get my ducks in a row ahead of time before my last semester where I'm scrambling to find a position that is just open or is a position that is willing to accept me and give myself that time required to find a company that not only do I want to work for, but that wants me to work for them as well. I'm going to save this answer as well. And if I can upload all of these instead, it should be a lot smoother experience for you to grade. Thank you for being patient with me. So this can happen from time to time, and when it does, it's usually very anxiety-inducing and very much a time that tests people's coping mechanisms when it comes to stress. But one of the most challenging situations I've ever been in while working was having to communicate over a virtual environment with a team I had never met, meeting all of them, and within that week that we met each other and were understanding each other's skill sets, had to turn around and complete a project. Um, and this became challenging because it tested time management, interpersonal skills, delegation, all these things at the same time. And I found that the hardest barrier to break through was that of being comfortable with talking to people that you had little experience working with and delegating tasks to them or allowing the opportunity to help somebody else do the same became very challenging on top of testing my own skills. And it really opened my eyes to how to fill a vacuum of structure or leadership in a quick pace without being able to offend somebody, which all starts with making sure people feel heard and valued as part of the team, but also making sure that at the end of the day, if somebody needs to begin delegating and breaking down tasks to accomplish that, that can get done as well, without creating a toxic working environment. So before I describe my greatest weakness, I would just like to say this isn't me trying to say, oh, my greatest weakness is working too much or something silly like that. I would say my greatest weakness is hyperfixation on one part of my process of design work or working with a team or accomplishing really any task. And if I don't catch myself doing this, I can end up spending way too much time on something that I thought or wanted to have as a bigger part of the process, but ended up not really being necessary to helping my team problem solve and accomplish our goals. This can be as simple as looking at one category of some behaviors we've identified and getting curious about why those behaviors are happening, and then fixating and creating concepts and iterating on those concepts far more than is necessary, when maybe our team realized outside of my own personal bubble that maybe that wasn't the best direction to go. And over the years, I've gotten better at catching myself going into these processes and being able to break out of them, and also practicing active listening to make sure that I'm not changing the team's direction without their approval or their rationale saying that that's a good thing. So to give you an example, outside of the one I gave earlier, which also includes a impending deadline, would be one of the projects I worked on that involved cross collaboration and pollination of ideas with a team from Beijing Normal University. This is a really interesting project about capturing the mental models, or the way people view something or interact with something, the mental model of Gen Z in regards to the concept of mobile banking. And throughout that project, we had to continuously update our documentation of our process and of the project, so that once we have finished that project cycle, aka in that class, that deadline of final presentations and deliverables is up, somebody can pick up our documentation, read it, and say, okay, I understand why you made the decisions you made and what rationale went into those. I understand who you talked to and why you went the direction you went, at least to some extent. So throughout the semester, it's best to continuously update your documentation as you go through your project, as to not leave it all to the end, forget things, rush things, etc. And while our team knew these were useful, keeping up with numerous presentations in the middle of the semester, scheduling many meetings a week, or in-class meetings, working on actually progressing our projects, these deadlines became something that would always serve as some kind of impending checkpoint for our team of whether or not we had both the documentation update ready and if we had enough work done during that period of time and how we're going to document that and how we're going to both iterate on that documentation and continue the work required to complete our project at the same time, moving into the next cycle. And we found that breaking down responsibilities as far ahead of time as possible as to clarify the extent of those responsibilities and to give the other team lead and myself time to review each team member's entries really proved to be what made the difference there. Yes, so recently I have gotten really interested in the design of motion-based interactions. So when a user interacts with something and some kind of motion on screen or some kind of haptic feedback from the product itself, also known as interaction design, is something that's really been interesting me. So I dived into the Adobe suite of tools and found that there's a lot of tutorials online and that it's very easy to take files from one Adobe software to another. Let's say I'm working on creating a custom icon for a wireframe in Adobe Illustrator. Then I can take that that design from Illustrator and easily move it over to After Effects. And from there, I can design an animation or some kind of custom interaction for a user, which to me, some people say this may seem unnecessary or extravagant, but a lot of a user's perception of whether or not something has happened comes from some kind of feedback, such as when somebody pushes a button in real life, they get the resistance pushing the button, and either some kind of click or pop happens, which they know, or they meet the resistance of not being able to push further, and they know that their interaction has been complete. When it's digital and it's just a touchscreen, every press you have feels the same. So having some kind of visual indication that you have completed that task is something I think is always useful and interesting to add. So the field of, and this is generally speaking, the field of technology, computer science, anything STEM, engineering, aerospace, all of that, building something, creating something, always seemed interesting to me. And when I came to Purdue University, I came in as undecided in their exploratory studies program because I knew Purdue had a lot of fantastic STEM programs. So no matter what I chose, I'd be in a good place and I wouldn't have to necessarily move colleges to get the best educational experience that I could. So when deciding I wanted to enter into UX, I was operating sort of in the CIT space, mostly because I was able to actually see how my work affected people and to see that I wasn't just fixing X number of lines of code from this one product that's going to get jumbled together with the tens of thousands of other lines of code the company is storing for this, that, and the other, and you're almost to some extent, and depending where you work and what you're working on, almost like a nameless actor with CS to me, from my perspective.